Surprise. Fuck, I didn't want the colorful thing. Oh shit. You thought I don't have fancy lighting in my room? Well, I do. I just can't say it smugly. I just can't. I do not support this brand. And honestly, it was stupid to buy 1 kilogram of this, but we have to live with our mistakes. Do not buy from Nestle. I shouldn't have, and I advise you not to either. Hello everybody, my name is Flame and I took a nap today. I will be talking to you about why I chose to study English, and to accompany me I have some really nice mood lighting. I lost the remote. Oh my god, why am I so dumb? Where's the... I literally just had it. Maybe the fact that I don't have my glasses makes it harder. Trash. Why am I so bad at making these videos? Honestly. I put it. Today I'll talk about how I chose to study English at the University of Luxembourg, and I'll try to convince you why I think there is merit to studying English and any other humanitarian subject. First, a little bit of backstory. I was born 21 years prior to the present day. When I was about 5 years old, my mother signed me up for English courses, and I hated her for it. I thought everything was too easy, that there was no reason to learn English, I wasn't having fun. But then she held her ground and she said, no, you're gonna go study English. And like it or not, that choice kind of affected my university career, as we can see at the moment. At the last year of high school, I wanted to study video game design, or at least I thought I wanted to study video game design, because as you know, I play a lot of video games. And I wanted to make video games, but I was actually really only interested in the humanitarian side of video game making. And I think intuitively, you as a person would also be more interested in that, because it's not actually interesting to program all day and draw assets and things like that unless it's your actual hobby. I was more interested in just, the ideation part of video game making. And ever since that time in my life, I learned a lot more about making video games, and I realized there is no job like that. But long story short, I wanted to apply for a university in the Netherlands which taught video game design, and last minute they changed the application process and you had to give a portfolio of all the video game levels you've ever done. And at the time, that was 0. So I still determined to go through it. I remember taking the bus to the edge of town where there was an agency which helps you apply for university. And I asked the woman about the motivational letter, which was an essential part of the application. She was explaining it to me, and as she was talking, I realized I went halfway through the capital to the edge of town to listen how to apply for a degree in video game design when I carried 4 literature books in case I get bored. I was carrying 4 literature books to read on the bus in case I got bored. And at that moment I realized I'm about to make a mistake. And this is, maybe it's one of those like signs of the universe or whatever, but I realized that's not, if I make this choice, I don't think I'll be happy. And I'll just kind of be pretending that I'm blind. And in fact, I was carrying these very two chrestomaties. I don't know what the exact English word would be, but these are compilations of the syllabi we have to study in high school in Bulgaria. And there's a lot of things to study here, like qualitatively, possibly as well. I'm just going to turn on the light for a moment. See this? These are all of the things you study in 1 year, and the next year you study this as well. And then for the graduation exam, you have to have studied all of these, because you might get an interpretive literary essay on any of these texts. So you have to remember, I think last time I counted them as 120 separate poems, and long books included, short stories as well, by about a dozen different authors, which is a lot. And I think the system is unfortunate if you're not a literature student, but I think it's really, really good if you're a literature student. I feel sorry for all my classmates who had to do this and never looked at anything like this afterwards. But I actually do think it's important to study literature regardless of your main field of study. And I will argue that a little bit later in this video. But yeah, when you have a curriculum like this, you have a lot of people who come out of high school hating literature. It's people who don't read for leisure and don't know other types of literature either, but whatever, that's a separate discussion. That's not what we're here to talk about. At any rate, I was basically prepared for an academic career with literature because of the high school I went to, and because of the good teacher I had. Some people would disagree, but my entire life I had studied English. I started studying English when I was 5 years old and never stopped. Now the next question was, where would I study? And I really, really wanted to go abroad. There was no way I was going to stay in my home country, and I wanted a change of scenery and people and everything else. I had never been to Luxembourg before I came for my bachelor's degree. Literally my first day in Luxembourg was 2 days before the semester started, with welcome day and whatnot. But the more time passed, I realized this was the right choice for me. Without going too deep into why and how and what happened afterwards, I'm just going to move on to the reasons why I think English and other humanitarian studies are worth our time. So in a lot of disciplines and in a lot of other fields, you very often don't have the question of the human. For instance, economics are a lot about math, and the human element is put into a category of unpredictable. In sciences, you have a very methodological approach, which in some ways takes the human factor into account, but notice what I said, it's a factor. Whereas I think in the humanities, we look at the human condition and experience, and that's not something which you really, really examine in other places. And the importance of this is that everyone fundamentally has human experience and is tied to the human condition. The world we experience is a series of stories that we tell, of things that we live through and things we believe in. I'm not saying this to demonstrate that nothing is real, everything is made up in a social construct. Rather, think about how a lot of our reality is linguistic. For example, right now I'm talking to you at a video and you're understanding me because we're using spoken language, which, sure, is a branch of linguistics, but the affective side of language is a humanitarian issue, ultimately. I will rather move on to 5 things I learned throughout my university career, which are more like snappy things. I won't elaborate too long on those, but if one of these seems more interesting, you can ask me and I might make a video about it, defending my very sharp and generalized point. Okay, I'm gonna have to open my laptop and I'm gonna have to read. So I'm just gonna, and the effect is all gone because I opened my laptop. So I think maybe I'm just gonna turn on the lights. Cool. What have you learned throughout your degree? Number 1, fiction shapes reality. The stories we hear influence the stories we tell. And as I made a point earlier, most of the reality we experience is language. The English-speaking world has an almost unfair leverage over any other culture. I really don't think anyone would disagree that America and Great Britain at the current moment, or at least in the 20th century and the beginning of the 21st century, which is still now, have had a kind of clout which is uncomfortable to think about how much they can influence the rest of the world. And because of something which happened with empires and colonization and things like that, and not too distant history, the language has become very, very common everywhere. And although I myself wouldn't identify as more culturally affiliated to America or England than my birth country, I think the scales are really tilted. There are maybe ways of amending that, and it is a bit awkward that I'm communicating all of this in English to you. I said I wouldn't elaborate. Let's move on. Language is amazing in what it can communicate, but it's also amazing in what it can't. So, in the 20th century, there's a thing called modernism. And one of the core concerns of modernism was the crisis of representation, how art can't demonstrate the real world as it is, and consequently language also can't demonstrate well, it's probably the opposite, first language then art, but the point is language can't convey the real world as it is, because we don't have the terms, the words, the vocabulary necessary to express all that we see, feel, or think. Number 4, America isn't a real place, in parentheses, subjective. There's this literary critic called Jean Baudrillard, and he wrote an entire piece on simulation and simulacra, which is about how we create simulations of real things, and then when the real thing, the original, is gone, the simulation becomes a simulacrum, which makes it have as much, if not more, power than the original. You know, don't watch a YouTube video to educate yourself in literary theory, because it kind of got the argument a little bit tangled up. But one of the statements he kind of bravely and roundaboutly makes in his article is America isn't a real place. Number 5, history is textual. How do we access history? I'm gonna tell you, we don't ask people who lived at the time. We have texts, and a lot of what we know about history is purely textual. And guess what? Texts can be fictional. Fiction shapes reality. See? We came back to the beginning. I didn't even plan this, but brilliant. I should write my own scripts more often. This video is longer than I would like it to be, so for the final part, I asked Alice to write 10 assumptions which people make when they learn you're studying English, and I will read them out loud, and I'll tell you whether they apply to me or not. Number 1, you want better job opportunities. Okay, English teachers in Luxembourg are very well paid, and I had no idea this was the case before coming. I had done no research into any job opportunities before coming to study English, because it was a passion choice, not a pragmatic choice. So yeah, it's definitely not because I want better job opportunities. Number 2, you are bad in everything else, especially math. I think I was good at math all throughout my school career up until graduation, but halfway through, so right before high school, I decided math is not what I want to focus on, because I discovered how good I was with Spanish and English, even though my Russian and German weren't really that good and I studied them, but I was really young, didn't really know what it meant to study. Wasn't particularly bad in everything else, but I was definitely better with languages than anything else. Number 3, you think your English is outstanding. Well, yeah. Number 4, you like Shakespeare. In high school, I think we only read Hamlet and maybe Romeo and Juliet and nothing else from Shakespeare. And I really couldn't tell whether I liked Hamlet. I was also not well versed enough in literature to know whether I liked Hamlet. I actually studied Hamlet before I got into literature, so there's your explanation. So number 4, you like Shakespeare? No. Number 5, your English is the only language that comes close to your native language in terms of proficiency. Yes, in fact, a lot of my teachers were afraid my Bulgarian would be worse than my English. And my parents make fun of me for the way I speak Bulgarian. And even relatives told me I have an English accent last time I saw them 2 summers ago. So, your parents made you study English. She got me there. Number 7, you want to get published. I did, but when that desire came to me, it was when I was writing in Spanish, not when I was writing in English. So yeah, I didn't come to university with the idea of I'm gonna get published after I graduate. Number 8, you love America/the UK. In 2020, I think it's hard to say either of those statements. Number 9, you love Taylor Swift/other popular culture artist. I really liked Adele when I was growing up and I listened to her all the time. And I still know all her songs by heart. I wouldn't say she made me study English. But I guess it's just an assumption about me, so true. Number 10, it was a last resort. It really wasn't. It was something which should have been a last resort, but I pushed it to the front like there was no tomorrow. So yeah, thank you for watching. I hope you don't mind that the first part of this video was in complete darkness, but I'll try experimenting with the lights a little more. They're flexible. Please stay tuned for another uncut, 2 uncuts, something Alice did on another channel, something I did on another channel, and whatever Alice comes up with, it's her turn this time. Thanks for watching and see you later. Why do I sound so depressed? You know, the best part of this video is I literally forgot to drink any of my chocolate milk. I should buy chocolate milk, not fucking Nesquik. Fuck. What an epiphany.